welcome to the shop. Hope you guys are cozy and warm. Maybe he's got something cozy and warm to drink, like tea or coffee. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about some ambitious projects I've been working on, and maybe some that you haven't seen yet. Now, this is a anvil that I made a little while back. I got started on it. As you see, the hardy hole's still round, pitchel hole's pretty small still. And as you can see, it looks a bit different, doesn't it? But I made this anvil from scratch, from bits and pieces that I've cut up and welded together to make this. And this anvil is almost the same size as my full-size anvil underneath. The only thing with this is it's completely hollow. That is one of the coolest parts about it. Now, why make a hollow anvil? Well, one of the main reasons is for weight. Now, my big anvil down here weighs almost 275 pounds or so. This anvil weighs like a fraction of that, like 1/16 or less the weight of my big anvil, which is amazing. That's one of the major issues with the big anvils, is that if you have a big anvil, it weighs a lot and it's really hard to move around. Another big thing with full-size anvils that are solid metal is the ring. Trying to cancel out the ring is one of the most annoying things ever. And so with a hollow anvil, you can both drain it with whatever's inside it, whether it's oil or sand or whatever's on the inside to add weight to it. You can then drain it, making it easier to move it around. But on top of that, you can now fill it with something that will help absorb a lot of the shock and deaden the anvil even more, which is amazing. So instead of putting magnets on the outside, which is what I do for my big ones, wrapping them with chains, making sure it's securely fixed to the ground, which is something any blacksmith should do anyway, now what I'm doing is filling it with sand or a substance or oil or a mix of everything that will deaden the sound. It will absorb all that shock that's being put into the face, gets absorbed down into the body, which is exactly what we want. Now, to get on to the ambitious projects I've started, or at least thought about doing, and kind of got started on them already. Now, talking about the hollow anvils, I have a massive one started out here. In comparison to that one, this one is absolutely monstrous. It weighs a lot. When this thing's fully welded up, it's going to be weighing quite a lot, but it's going to be massive. The working face on this is over 2 feet by 10 inches. My working face on my full-size anvil right now is about 6 inches by about 18 inches. Maybe a little more, maybe 20 inches. This is almost 30 inches by 10 inches. It's 4 inches wider and almost double the length. That's incredible. That's huge. And not only that, this base for this anvil is only about 12 inches high. This is almost a full 34 inches high. It goes straight from the ground right up to my knuckle height, which is absolutely perfect. That's exactly where you want your anvil to rest, is when you make a fist, that you can relaxedly just rest your fist on it and it pretty much lines up exactly with your fist. That's what you want. And so when I put the tool steel face on here, whatever kind of face I put on here, because this is not going to be the final face, I'm going to add a face to this when I have enough money to buy the metal for that. And it's going to get bolted down so I can replace the face easily. So not only am I improving upon the hollow design and making this hollow as well to lighten weight, and I can also add weight to it when I want to, or drain it. I can add magnets to the inside to hide the magnets so I can make this look completely flush and perfect. Not only that, but I can also change the face out. I'm going to have holes, bolt holes, so that I can weld on bolts onto my tool steel face and attach them on by bolting them down to the actual anvil. And then if I have students working with me or whatever happens, if the face gets damaged or worn down over time, then I can then take that face off, weld on new bolts on a new face, and then put that face back on it. I can also change it out for maybe a lesser material. So if I have students coming that I know are probably going to hit the face and ding it up, I can put on a mild steel face or a stainless steel face or something that's going to be cheaper than the tool steel so they don't damage that. So I can keep that fresh and clean for me and bolt it on whenever I'm going to be using it. And then when students come, I can bolt on a material that doesn't matter if they ding it or wreck it or scratch it. That's totally okay. So that is a really ambitious project. You can see how high it is, that I can basically just rest my knuckles on it and have my arm just slightly bent, which is exactly what you want. Another project is I got some really, don't worry about that. I got some really heavy duty channel here. I got 3 pieces set up and a big block of steel on top. And I'm gonna knock off all those extra bits that I was gonna weld on. I'm gonna knock those all off and just make this, essentially cut this into a triangle so it lines up exactly with these. And then these little V spots, there we go. These little V spots where all the channels connect, I'm gonna put a round hole, square hole, and a rectangle hole for all those, which is the idea. Another ambitious project I got started on, which is all just kind of parts being welded together for now, is, I'll start with this first. For a while, I would use the angle grinder cutoff wheel. That's awesome. I don't have room for a big hacksaw or a bandsaw or for basically anything like that. I don't have a lot of room in my shop. I already have a lot of equipment in here. I have a lot of things in here because it's a garage. So I have to have at least room that if we needed to bring a vehicle in here for whatever reason, I can still do that. So I have to be able to make things so they can move around. I can change stuff whenever I need to. And so I started putting together a automatic hacksaw machine that I can change the blade out on. So I don't know if you can see that there. All the parts are basically put together, but it does move in and out when I'm not holding my phone. It does move in and out. I just need to make a part there that connects to a drill, and I'm going to make it so it functions on a drill. And I have a little electric drill that plugs into the wall, and I can set the speed to it. That's something that I really, really liked, is that I can set the speed to it. Another thing is a small power hammer. It's just a simple spring hammer that goes up and down, and the weight on it, I want to say, is maybe 25 pounds at most. It's just solid metal that's going to come down, and I'm kind of setting up the same way as the hacksaw so that I can connect it to this really powerful drill that I have, and it's the part that will do the turning for me. And that makes it even more efficient for me, for my tiny shop, that I can set everything up efficiently and effectively, and also use it in comparison with my drop hammer, which is now securely mounted to this actual workbench and not on that springy table I had before, which is now the foot pedaled grind wheel. So there's been a lot of things going on, a lot of things that maybe you haven't seen yet or haven't talked about, like this anvil here. And I've been playing around with this anvil a lot lately and using it with clay to then try different forging methods and different things that I'd like to do with this. So that's a lot. I played with this, haven't quite finished it off entirely yet, but I've been playing a lot with it, and I've been having a lot of fun with this, and it works really well. This actually does have a tool face on it. It has a 1095 face that's been welded on, not heat treated yet, but welded on. But even with it unheat treated, it still has a much higher hardness than a lot of the cast iron anvils that you'll buy on the market anyway. So even if I chose not to harden it, it's still technically going to work harden on its own, and it's still going to be a decent face. It just might not last long if it's not hardened and heat treated properly and tempered. So there's that. I did paint it with a high temperature paint, but I can burn that off at any time I choose. But this monstrosity here, this huge thing, is absolutely incredible, and I'm really looking forward to working with this and getting this made and finished. And of course, the striking anvil, I can actually use a sledge on this, and when I have all the holes set up, I can make tools a lot more efficiently and effectively using this. That when this is securely mounted down to the ground or whatever, that I can use my sledgehammer on this and not have to worry about damaging my nice anvil. That's one of the biggest things with having an old anvil like this, that it looks like someone tried to repair once before but didn't do a very good job. It looks like they tried to weld the face, they tried to do repairs to it, and of course they ruined the temper on the face. That's one of the worst parts about having to fix an anvil like that, is if it gets damaged or chipped or wrecked, and someone tries to weld it like that, now they wreck the temper on the face, and now it's soft. So now, whenever I try to hammer on it, you'll see dings in the face, and that's from either the metal depressing into it or a slight strike off where it's dinged the material. or if I had someone working with me or helping me out in the shop and they ding the anvil, it's easy to ding it now because it's got a softened face, and that's really frustrating. I don't want that to get damaged any further, and that's why I've looked into other options for my own anvils and how to make my own anvils, but also the striking anvil. Now I actually have a space where I can strike on it, and who cares if I ding it or wreck it, because it's meant for that. It's meant for a heavy sledge hit. So that's why it's got some really thick heavy-duty channel as the legs. That's why it's got a really thick, like almost 1 inch thick face on it, so I can strike on that and not have to worry about that whatsoever. All those other bits and pieces that I welded on was an original idea before. I'm going to knock those off. I really don't need all that on there. It was more or less to try to turn it into a little bit of a swedge block kind of thing anyway, but I don't really need that. I might weld them on the bottom facing up towards me, and then if I flip the anvil over, then I can still use those if I choose to, but I absolutely don't have to. That's a complete choice of mine. So that's a little bit what's going on there. I don't think there's anything else to talk about besides that, but this thing is a monster. So I'm going to stop the video and record a little bit more, just me standing by it, because it's massive and I want to show that. So got my little anvil, got my little hammer that I made myself. This is the size of the anvil. You can see how big it is. Like this is huge. And it goes right down to the floor. So I don't have to have a full wooden base like that anvil does. I can actually have it like this. And I can just work here as it is. Of course, lastly, we have the post vise here, or the blacksmith vise, also known as a leg vise. This is something I've been working on for the last little bit, and I'm still adding the supports in where the jaws are so I can actually properly support this. But there's a couple things with this that I've done slightly different than some other blacksmiths, where these bolts actually serve a purpose. I didn't just make it from bolts because I had them, which I did, but the nice thing about having these teeth from the bolts is that I can grip like hammer heads or thicker material in between here, or rods if I'm cutting something up. I can actually clamp it using these teeth. These teeth will grip it for me, which is really, really nice. And especially having this little bit of a lip here where it curves, I can hook something in there, or have wider flat stock or whatever it can hook in there, because the jaws really don't open as wide as you might think. If I lift it up here so you can take a look, you can see some really nice decorational parts on the actual mount plate. The jaws look pretty good. They're pretty close together. I've added a little accent twisted spot there with a little scroll. That came off a fire poker I made back in college. And as you might notice with this, it doesn't have a spring. And you might say, well, every blacksmith vise has a spring. Why doesn't it have one? And I went for an alternate design. Instead of having a spring, I added a washer that's welded in, and the washer kind of acts like a stopper. So when the vise is being pulled back out, this washer will then push this back out. So there's no spring pushing it back and out. It's fully one solid unit, which has benefits and downsides. One of the downsides is I can't unscrew this whole thing. It's now a solid unit, which is a benefit at the same time. It's a benefit that it's a solid unit. But if I ever need a repair or whatever, I need to cut this off and re-weld it back together, essentially. That's one mild downside. But it does work. It does open and close. I'm not going to do it right now because I have the tension on this super, super tight, so that when I put this back in the forge, it's going to even out these heads a little bit. I'm just going to basically heat up the jaws and the top portion before the threads, and that's going to expand these out because I have this cranked down super, super tight, and it's going to want to release that tension. And when it heats up, it's going to do that. It's going to spread these jaws open for me. And that just allows me to tighten it down and more and more and more, because I want this pretty much right there. These two little pieces, I want them touching. And that means that the jaws are fully closed at that point. And that's what I want. So it's kind of like a little shelf there. Kind of like when I was talking about putting hammerheads or whatever in there to hold that. This is the shelf that those would rest on. So that's why those are there, if you're wondering. That's just a shelf to rest. Any material that's being held in these jaws here in the lower part would rest on those. But that's the steak anvil, and the base is also nicely decorated with some peening and some texture. See if you can see that, as well as the mount plate at the bottom. Not that I absolutely need a mount plate on the bottom, but it just helps disperse the energy. If I'm hammering down on the top of this, then I don't have to worry about that as much. And I might put a bigger bolt in eventually as well. But there's that. And it looks quite nice. It's all scrap steel, when something like this would cost $500, $250, money I don't really want to spend, especially if I don't have a lot of money to put towards stuff like this. I have to find another way to do it myself. And this is essentially it. Getting some metal from work, getting some metal from scrap, from stuff I've done in college, and putting it together to then make functional pieces for myself, for my shop, that should hopefully last me a lifetime and hopefully go on to future generations. Would be really, really nice. So that's some of the projects I've been working on lately. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, awesome. And hopefully in the future, I'll be able to have people over for courses. They can book time with me and do some work with me. Would be awesome. And they can kind of pick and choose what things they really want to learn. If they want to do basic blacksmithing, ornamentals, or if they want to do things like flowers, functional stuff around the house, fire pokers, all kinds of different things. So we'll get into that a little bit maybe in the future. We'll see how things go. And if everything's good, then you might be seeing stuff like that open in the near future. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a good one, and stay cozy. Okay, welcome back. It's been a little while since I last talked. Here is the anvil coming together. It's pretty much put together where it needs to be, tack welded where it needs to be. It's not fully welded up yet, but I have the face shaped a little bit, and I have the base shaped and tacked together. I have the striking anvil shaped and tacked together as well, as you can see. So it's got basically that triangular look to it. And then I've just cut the face to match. And there's the anvil. This is the side I'd be forging from. So this side will have the hardy hole and pritcher hole. And then this side will have the horn. And the reason why I have it oriented like that is not only to match the one that I have over here, but when I'm holding the rod in my hand, I hold it in my left hand, so I want the horn on the left side so that I can maneuver around the horn more effectively and hammer more effectively, and then have my pritcher hole and hardy hole back here so I can move around that effectively. So that's why I have that oriented the way that I have that. And yeah, so those are the two pieces welded up and fabricated, pretty much ready to go to then clean up, properly weld it, and then start drilling my holes and figuring out how to put some of this together as well. And I still have a lot of that 2-inch rod that's over there. I think you can see it right beside the WD. There it is, WD-40 right there. That 2-inch W1, I believe it is. I think it's W1 steel that I might use for the horn. And down there I had like a prototype idea for an anvil. I'm going to take the sledge or axe malt off that and use that here as well. So I'm kind of fitting parts together and putting pieces together right now. But this is, oh, missed it. This is the anvil. And it is gigantic compared to this guy. As you can tell, it's very large. But that's that. There you go.